War is not about heroics. It is the accounting of death. That was the belief of a man who, in mere seconds, burned a column of elite German armor while commanding a broken tank. Today we will break down one of the most scandalous and incredible episodes of the Great Patriotic War. You will learn how a dead tank rose from the ashes to shoot the enemy at point-blank range. We will show you the flip side of heroism, the burning water of the northern Donets, where men burned alive for a diversionary maneuver, and the icy calm of a commander who, at that moment, was simply solving an equation. Was it brilliant tactics or the madness of a suicidal man? And why, in the peaceful year of 1945, did this officer's hands tremble at the sight of an ordinary child's doll? The answer at the end will make you shudder. Stay tuned. They don't write about this in textbooks. July 1943. The Kursk salient. The air is melting not from the sun, but from the concentration of lead and diesel fumes per square meter of space. The steppe is trembling. The horizon is shrouded in a black veil, a mix of dust, the soot of burning machines, and black earth churned up by artillery. Lieutenant Gromov's T-34 stands in a hollow, but this is not an ambush position. This is a place where machinery goes to die. A second ago, the hull shuddered from a glancing blow by a solid shot. The sound was as if a hammer weighing a ton had struck a bell with living people inside. The shockwave passed through the armor, through their bodies, knocking the air from their lungs. Inside the turret, there is a smell that cannot be confused with anything else. A mixture of burnt oil, cordite, human sweat, and red-hot metal. The driver mechanic, Kostin, yanks the levers toward himself, trying to turn the machine, but Gromov sees what is hidden from the others by the armor. The strike hit the joint of the turret and the hull. The turret ring is deformed. The commander stomps on the turret traverse pedal. The electric drive howls strainingly, but the gun barrel remains motionless. The teeth of the ring gear have locked tight. The tank is blind and immobilized in its firing sector. "Turret jammed!" The loader Sidorov's scream drowns in the roar of battle. "Comrade Lieutenant, it's a wedge!" Gromov does not scream. Panic is a variable that leads to the death of the crew with a probability close to 100%. He is an engineer. His brain, honed in the workshops of the Chelyabinsk tractor plant, currently sees not just a combat vehicle, but a complex diagram of stresses and force vectors. A jammed turret means that the 76 millimeters of their gun are pointing at nothing. Turning the entire hull on this viscous soil will take precious seconds. The German Zeiss optics do not forgive such delays. Through the periscope, Gromov sees silhouettes. They emerge from the smoke like geometrically perfect predators. Heavy German machines. Distance, 800 meters. Closing. The frontal armor of a Panther, 80 millimeters of steel at a rational slope, makes it practically invulnerable to the T-34's gun from this range. Penetration is possible only in the side or rear, but maneuvering is impossible right now. It is an equation with zero solution in a frontal attack. "Start it up! Let's go!" Kostin's voice breaks into a falsetto. The mechanic is already reaching for the hatch. The instinct for self-preservation dictates the only solution: to flee the steel box that will turn into a mass grave in a minute. "Belay that!" Gromov's voice sounds dry, like the click of a breech block. "Stay at your posts. Engines stop." A silence descends inside the tank that is more terrifying than the roar of explosions. The crew looks at the commander. They see not a madman, but a man running calculations. Gromov understands. Any movement of the tracks now will unmask them completely. A puff of exhaust gas will indicate to the Germans that the target is alive. Finishing off a crippled tank is a matter of one shell. The chance of survival while evacuating in an open field under machine gun fire is 0. Only one option remains: an engineering bluff. Poker with death, where the stake is the lives of 4 men. "Listen to my order," Gromov speaks quickly, chopping his phrases. "We are dead. To them, we are scrap metal. Do not touch the turret. Lower the barrel all the way down. We are simulating a hydraulic recoil failure." Sidorov looks at the gun breech. His hands are shaking, but he begins to turn the elevation flywheel. The cannon barrel slowly nods toward the ground, taking on an unnatural, broken position. This is the language of war, understood by any tanker. This is what a dead machine looks like, one whose life support systems have been severed. "Kostin, smoke canisters, 2 of them, under the stern, fast." The belly hatch opens with a clang. The smell of damp earth and wormwood bursts inside. The mechanic tosses out the canisters and slams the hatch shut. A few seconds later, gray, acrid smoke begins to seep from the outside, enveloping the rear of the tank. The visual effect of burning wiring or smoldering oil. Gromov looks at his watch. The second hand moves in jerks, measuring the time of their non-existence. "Attention! Complete silence. Do not move. Breathe every other time." Now, the T-34 is not a combat unit. It is part of the landscape. A pile of metal weighing 26 tons. The temperature inside the fighting compartment is rising. The July sun heats the armor to the state of a frying pan. The ventilation is off. Sweat floods their eyes and stings their abrasions. Gromov feels a sticky trickle running down his back. He knows the physics of the process. If they hold out, German pedantry will play into their hands. The enemy saves ammunition. Why waste an 88mm shell on something that is already burning and has its barrel buried in the ground? Through the vision block, the German column can be seen continuing its movement. 5 heavy machines. They move confidently. The clatter of their tracks drowns out all sounds. The earth transmits vibration to the hull of the T-34, and every crew member feels this trembling with their spine. It is the vibration of approaching death. Gromov does not take his eyes off the lead vehicle. He sees the muzzle brake of the German gun turning in their direction. 1 second. 2. This is a check. If anyone inside the Soviet tank flinches now, if the turret twitches, it is the end. Gromov looks at the gunner Makarov's hands. White knuckles grip the traverse handle. "Hold it," Gromov whispers. Not an order, a statement of fact. "They are passing by." The German commander in the hatch of the lead Panther looks through his binoculars. He sees smoke. He sees a lowered barrel. He sees the statistics of his victories, not a tactical trap. The turret of the German tank returns to the travel position. The column continues moving, exposing their vulnerable sides to the dead Soviet tank. The armor thickness there is 45mm. It is no longer a wall. It is cardboard for a .76 caliber from a distance of 300 meters. Inside the tank, there is a ringing silence. One can hear the watch ticking on the commander's wrist and the heavy breathing of the loader. Fear recedes. Its place is taken by cold, crystal-clear calculation. Gromov calculates the trajectory, the angle of impact, the time of flight. He mentally draws a diagram of the battle, where every German machine is simply a set of assemblies and units that must be disabled in a specific sequence. First, the trailer, to cut off the retreat. Then the leader, to create a traffic jam. They pass. The distance closes to pistol range. 200 meters. 150. Gromov sees the weld seams on the German armor. He sees the spare track links on the sides. He waits. The engineer knows. The mechanism must be triggered at the moment of maximum load. Makarov, Gromov's voice sounds like metal scraping against glass. Target 1, the trailer, armor piercing. Wait for my command. The calculation proved correct. The tank had turned into a trap. But war does not forgive luck twice, and this calculated engineering bluff was merely the prelude to a real hell that would unfold in a few seconds. Gromov wipes sweat from his forehead with an oily rag. His hand does not tremble. There is nothing to tremble. Nerves have been replaced by control cables. Now the physics of destruction will begin. The physics of destruction takes its rights instantly. When Gromov gives the command, he initiates the irreversible process of converting the potential energy of gunpowder into the kinetic energy of impact. 76 millimeters of steel and explosives leave the barrel at a speed exceeding the speed of sound. Distance, 150 meters. This is not shooting. This is an execution. At such a range, shell dispersion is practically non-existent, and the initial velocity guarantees penetration of 45 millimeters of German side armor clean through. Fire! The tank jerks backward, as if hit in the forehead with a sledgehammer. The gun recoil ejects the smoking casing onto the floor of the fighting compartment with a characteristic ring that immediately drowns in the clatter of the breech block. Sidorov, the loader, acts on reflexes hammered into his subcortex by thousands of repetitions. His hands are manipulators. Grab the fixed round, ram it home. Remove the hand a split second before the breech wedge severs the fingers. The shell strikes the engine compartment of the trailing Panther. German steel, alloyed and hardened, cannot withstand the point pressure of several tons per square centimeter. The armor cracks, letting death inside. The detonation of gasoline vapors happens instantly. The rear tank of the German column flares up, turning into a fiery cork. The road back is cut off. "Hit!" Makarov screams, not looking up from the sight. There is no triumph in his voice, only the recording of a fact. Emotions right now are excess noise in the communication system. "Target 2, the leader. Armor piercing," Gromov shouts over the engine noise. "Block the column." The logic of battle dictates a cruel sequence. Lock the enemy in a fiery bag. While the Germans realize that the dead Russian tank has come to life, 3 seconds pass. For a tank battle, this is an eternity. The turrets of the Panthers begin to slowly turn toward the threat. But here the mathematics of angular velocities comes into play. The turret traverse speed of the T-34 with an electric drive is higher than the reaction of the German crews, stunned by the sudden strike from the flank. Inside the Soviet tank, hell becomes tangible. The fan cannot cope with the propellant gases. The air becomes thick, bluish, bitter to the taste. It tears at the throat, makes eyes water. But no one coughs. The body blocks all unnecessary reflexes. Kostin holds the machine on the brakes, ready to tear it from its place at any second if Gromov orders. But there is no order. The engineer knows, as long as they stand in the smoke of their own shot and the smoke screen, their outlines are blurred. Movement would make them a clear target. "Ready," wheezes Sidorov. The second shot tears through the distance. The lead German machine takes a hit under the turret ring, the most vulnerable spot. The shell jams the traverse mechanism. The German tank twitches. Its cannon freezes helplessly, looking toward the forest. Now the column is trapped from 2 sides. 3 machines in the center are targets in a shooting gallery. The methodical work of destruction begins. 6 minutes. Exactly that long is the duration of this battle. 360 seconds of concentrated violence. Gromov dictates corrections as if reading a lecture in an auditorium, only instead of chalk, he has armor-piercing slugs, and instead of a blackboard, the sides of enemy vehicles. "Sight constant, Lead 0. Hit the track. Makarov works like a metronome. Shot. The clatter of the casing on the floor. The clang of the lock. Shot. Inside the fighting compartment, heat accumulates. The temperature rises to 50 degrees. Sweat floods faces. Clothes stick to bodies, turning into a wet, heavy hide. Sidorov is no longer breathing through his nose. He greedily gulps the poisoned air with his mouth. The weight of each shell seems doubled, but the rate of fire does not drop. This is the physiology of survival. Muscles work beyond the limit of the possible, fueled by pure adrenaline. Outside, chaos reigns, which Gromov perceives through the narrow slit of the vision block as a set of visual data. The third Panther tries to turn on the spot, exposing its rear. A mistake. A fatal mistake by a crew panicked in the face of an invisible threat. High explosive! On the track! Break his movement! Gromov changes the ammunition type in the equation. An armor-piercing round would zip right through without hitting vital components if it missed the engine. A high-explosive fragmentation shell will tear the tracks, turning the tank into a stationary firing point. Impact. Explosion at the drive sprocket. The track belt flies off, uncoiling like a snake on the ground. Inertia swings the tank sideways, opening the ideal angle for the final shot. Armor piercing! Into the ammo rack! The shell enters the side just below the turret. The explosion of the ammunition load inside a German tank is a phenomenon of monstrous force. The multi-ton turret is torn from the ring and tossed into the air like the lid of a boiling cauldron. A pillar of fire rises 10 meters high. The shockwave hits the hull of the T-34, but the crew no longer pays attention to it. 2 remain. The Germans are firing wildly. Shells whistle over Gromov's turret, shearing off bush branches, plowing the earth a meter from the tracks. This is blind fire. Panic has deprived the enemy of their main advantage, accuracy. Gromov remains cold. He excluded fear from the equation 5 minutes ago. Now he sees only aiming angles and reload times. Kostin, short forward! Changing position! The tank leaps from the cloud of smoke. A change of attack vector. The Germans expect a blow from the old point, but death comes from a new azimuth. The fourth machine takes a hit in the side. The crew tries to leave the burning tank. Gromov does not give the order to shoot at the men. His target is the machinery, the mechanisms, the threat. When the echo of the last explosion fades, a ringing remains in the ears. A dense, cotton-like ringing that cuts off the sounds of the world. 5 carcasses smoke on the road. Black, greasy smoke rises vertically into the indifferent blue sky. Inside the T-34, oxygen is running out. "Cease fire," says Gromov. He does not recognize his own voice. It is the scratch of sandpaper. "Look around." Sidorov slides down the wall of the ammo rack onto the floor, right onto a pile of smoking casings. His hands shake with a fine, nasty tremor. This is the come-down. The biochemistry of an organism that has exhausted its resources. Makarov wipes the optics with his sleeve, leaving oily streaks on the glass. Gromov opens the hatch. Fresh air hits his nose with the smell of burning and the sweetish scent of burnt meat. But that is not the main thing. The main thing is the silence. It presses on the eardrums harder than the cannonade. The engineering calculation was justified. The problem is solved. 5 eliminated variables, 4 preserved constants, the lives of his crew. The lieutenant climbs out onto the armor. He looks at his handiwork not as a conquering warrior, but as a master craftsman who has finished a hard, dirty shift at the lathe. His hands are black with soot. His overalls are soaked in oil and sweat. No heroism, only the fatigue of metal and man. Gromov takes out a cigarette case. His fingers struggle to hold the cigarette. The first drag burns his lungs, but returns a sense of reality. The mathematics of the battle balanced out. But Gromov knows. This success is a statistical anomaly that command will want to turn into a rule. And he will have to explain the formula of this survival to those who are used to fighting not with numbers, but with slogans. The headquarters dugout is dug into the earth 3 logs deep. Above is half a meter of black soil and logs capable of withstanding a direct hit from a howitzer shell. Inside, the air is stale, thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of kerosene. On a table hammered together from shell crates, a map is spread out. Red arrows on it look like opened arteries of the front. The general, gray-haired with a face like porous stone, does not look at the map. He looks at Lieutenant Gromov. In the corner, a field telephone chirps, but the sound seems distant, insignificant. Gromov stands straight, hands at his sides. His overalls still smell of the burning of that very hollow where 5 German machines turned into scrap metal. On the lieutenant's face are oil stains he didn't have time to wash off, but his eyes are clean, cold. There is none of that feverish shine found in soldiers who have miraculously escaped the clutches of death. In them is the calmness of a slide rule. "Repeat that, Lieutenant." The general's voice creaks like an ungreased hinge. "You claim that you intentionally placed the vehicle under fire, shut off the engine in a direct fire contact zone?" "No, sir, Comrade General. I did not place it under fire. I misled the enemy regarding the combat capability of the unit." Gromov speaks evenly, punching out the words. For him, this is not an excuse, but a technical report. The strike to the turret joint led to jamming. Combat effectiveness in dynamics dropped to 0. The probability of destruction during an attempted retreat was 99%. The general drums his fingers on the table. Next to him sits a colonel from the political department, frowning, writing something quickly in a notebook. The situation is non-standard. According to regulations, stopping in battle without a command is cowardice. But the result, 5 burned Panthers and a saved crew, does not fit the tribunal's scheme. "I am a design engineer by civilian profession," Gromov continues, seeing the command's confusion. "Before the war, I worked at the Chelyabinsk tractor plant. In '41, we tested shafts for torsion. I know strength of materials. I know what metal looks like when it is dying." A flash of the Chelyabinsk tractor plant workshop races through his memory. The thunder of hammers, sparks of welding flying like fireworks. Gromov remembers the smell of hot scale. There he learned to understand the language of machines. He saw how steel gets tired, how micro cracks appear, how a structure loses rigidity before crumbling. A tank for him is not a sacred cow, but a complex system of stresses. If the system is damaged, one must change the usage algorithm, not charge into trouble with slogans. The Germans are pedants, Comrade General. They were taught to shoot at moving or firing targets. They believe in their optics. If a tank is smoking, the barrel is lowered. There is no movement. For a German gunner, it is a written-off target. He crosses it out of the threat equation. This is psychology multiplied by a Wehrmacht manual. I used their manual against them. "You played cards with death, Gromov." The colonel looks up from his notebook. "And what if they had fired a control shot?" The risk was calculated. The probability of a control shot on an obviously destroyed target in the presence of other threats is less than 10%. The Germans save shells. It's logistics. They transport ammunition thousands of kilometers. Wasting an 88mm slug on a pile of iron is irrational. I bet on their rationality. Gromov approaches the table. He wasn't given permission, but he takes a pencil. On the margins of the map, right on the gray paper, he draws a diagram. Not a tactical map with little arrows, but a vector diagram. The Panther's viewing angle, the firing sector of the jammed T-34 turret, distances. This is the language in which he thinks. Look, I turned a disadvantage, the immobility of the turret, into a condition of the problem. We became a pillbox, a hidden pillbox. Turning the gun was impossible, so we waited for the targets to enter our sights themselves. This is not heroism. Heroism is throwing yourself under tracks with a grenade because there is no other way out. We had a way out, an engineering one. The general looks at the drawing. Simple lines, hard logic. He is used to reports about fury, about hatred for the enemy, about the last breath. And here, physics. Before him stands a man who fights not on emotions, but on intellect. Gromov looks like a professor who is mistakenly dressed in a tank helmet and put into an inferno. Are you suggesting we incorporate this, so to speak, performance into combat regulations? The general raises an eyebrow. I suggest the tactic of false destruction, Gromov corrects. In conditions of critical damage to the chassis or turret, simulation of fire with smoke canisters, shutting down systems, waiting for the enemy to enter point-blank range. It is effective in defense and ambushes. It will save machines and men. Silence hangs in the dugout. The colonel stops writing. The idea is insane and brilliant at the same time. It requires not just bravery from the crew, but nerves of steel. To sit in an iron box while monsters capable of crushing you like a tin can crawl past and not breathe. This is a level of composure not accessible to everyone. This isn't for everyone, Lieutenant, the general finally says, pushing the map away. Not everyone has nerves like your Chelyabinsk torsion bars. Someone will flinch. Someone will scream. And then everyone will die. Your case is an exception. Survivorship bias, as the mathematicians say. Fear is an extra variable, Gromov parries. It can be eliminated by training. The crew must know. Panic kills faster than a shell. If a man understands the mechanics of battle, he stops fearing the mysticism of death. He begins to work. Kostin, Sidorov, Makarov, they aren't heroes in the poster sense. They simply performed their job with quality. Turned flywheels, pressed pedals, accurately and on time. The general stands up. In the cramped space of the dugout, he seems huge. He walks past Gromov, stepping heavily with his boots on the plank flooring. Go, engineer. Get your machine in order. I'll accept your report, but we won't write this into the regulations just yet. War is chaos, not a blueprint. Today you got lucky with German pedantry, and tomorrow you'll run into some fanatic from the SS who blasts everything that moves, and doesn't move. Gromov nods. He didn't expect applause. He knows that the inertia of staff thinking is heavier than the armor of a tiger. And one more thing, Gromov. The general stops at the exit. You be careful with the equations out there next time. Mathematics is an exact science, but a bullet is a fool. Dismissed. The lieutenant exits the dugout into the night. The air outside is fresh, cool. Somewhere far away, to the north, sheet lightning flares. Rocket artillery is working. Gromov looks at the stars. For someone, this is romance. For him, they are navigational landmarks. He takes a small notebook from his pocket. There, among entries about fuel consumption and oil temperature, new data is written. Reaction time of a German gunner. turret traverse speed of a panther, ricochet angles. He is not offended by the general. He understands. They see war differently. For the general, it is a map and casualties. For Gromov, it is a gigantic, monstrous mechanism that works incorrectly, with a huge coefficient of friction and energy losses. And his task as an engineer is to find a way to optimize this process, to make the efficiency of his tank approach 100% and crew losses approach 0. He walks to the repair base, where the banging of sledgehammers is heard. His tank is there, his laboratory. Machine number 114. It needs fixing. The turret ring needs straightening, the optics replaced. Tomorrow there will be a task again. There will be variables again. And Gromov is ready to solve them. The only thing that worries him is statistics. Probability theory says that luck is an exhaustible resource. The average life of a tank in an offensive is 3 attacks. He has already survived a dozen. The survival graph is creeping into the red zone, but as long as the engine starts and the gun shoots, the equation is not closed. War is, above all, accounting. A cruel, soulless ledger where men and machines are listed in the expense column, and only kilometers of scorched earth are in the income column. Dry statistics of the year 1943 state the average lifespan of a T-34 tank on the front line is 3 attacks, or 6 weeks of operation. If a crew lives a month, they are veterans. If 2, legends. The crew of machine number 114 has been fighting for a year already. From the point of view of military acceptance and rear analysts, the existence of Lieutenant Gromov and his men is a statistical anomaly, a gross error in the calculations of loss planners that the Wehrmacht simply cannot correct. But Gromov knows there are no anomalies. There are only unaccounted variables in the survival equation. Luck is a term for amateurs. A professional operates with the concept of probability. Another battle for a nameless height, marked on the map only by an elevation above sea level. The landscape is plowed by craters so much that it resembles the lunar surface. The Germans are snapping back with dense fire. Their 75mm battery works methodically, covering square after square. The air trembles from shock waves. Mud raised by explosions does not have time to settle, hanging in the air as a brown suspension. Gromov does not hide inside the turret. He observes through the slightly open hatch, risking a shard. He needs to see the flashes to calculate the interval. A screech. A sound that makes insides compress into a tight knot. It is not the whistle of a mortar shell or the rustle of a howitzer round. It is a direct, flat trajectory shot. An armor-piercing slug passes within mere centimeters of the commander's cupola. The air blast, dense as a boxer's punch, hits Gromov on the helmet, pressing his head into his shoulders. The tank armor rings, vibrates like a huge bell struck by a sledgehammer. The smell of ozone and red-hot metal momentarily overpowers the stench of diesel. Inside the fighting compartment, paralysis sets in. Sidorov, the loader, freezes with a heavy shell in his hands. His eyes are wide, splashing with animal terror. The driver-mechanic Kostin clutches the levers so hard his knuckles turn white. They understand. Less than a second separated them from death. 1 moment, and the steel box would have turned into a mass grave, smearing their bodies over the internal bulkheads. The crew waits for the commander's scream, waits for panic, waits for the order to run.
Error.
Gromov's voice in the intercom sounds mundane, as if he is commenting on a mistake in a drawing. The German gunner didn't account for wind drift. 2 mils to the left. We have 12 seconds before sight correction. Kostin, left lever toward you, full throttle. We're moving into the dead zone under the slope. This is not bravado. This is a dry statement of fact.
For Gromov, the passing shell is not a miracle, not divine intervention. It is a physical body moving along a ballistic trajectory. If the vector of the shell's movement and the coordinates of the tank did not intersect at one point in space-time, it means the equation was solved in their favor. Emotions are inappropriate here. Fear is irrational. It interferes with the brain's processing speed. Trajectory, however, is absolutely logical. The tank jerks from its place, tracks tearing the ground, throwing up clods of mud.
The machine dives into the saving lowland a second before the Earth rears up from the next explosion at their previous spot. The calculation was precise. 12 seconds. The crew looks at their commander. In their eyes is a mixture of fear and awe. For Kostin, a simple village boy who barely finished 7 grades, Gromov is not just a superior officer. He is a shaman of numbers. A man who speaks the language of death and knows how to negotiate with it. They don't believe in amulets or prayers. They believe in the lieutenant's slide rule. If Gromov is calm, it means the solution to the problem has been found. If he says error, it means they can live. Gromov feels these gazes on the back of his neck. He knows that for them, he has become the guarantor of safety. But he himself harbors no illusions. He looks at the pressure gauges, at the engine hour meter. A tank is not just 26 tons of alloy steel. It is a complex geometric figure in an aggressive environment. Survival is the ability to present armor at such an angle that the kinetic energy of the enemy shell goes into a ricochet. The crew's life depends on the cosine of the angle of impact. Underturn the hull by 10 degrees, death. Overturn, a spark and a scratch on the armor. The battle subsides. Evening descends on the mutilated steppe. Gromov takes out his notebook. His hands are in oil, ingrained soot under his nails that no soap can remove. He records ammo and fuel consumption, but in his mind he keeps other statistics. Probability theory is an implacable and cruel science. With every battle, with every enemy miss, with every successful maneuver, the chance of a fatal outcome grows. One cannot flip heads forever. The limit of luck is exhaustible. The mathematical expectation of death approaches 1. "Comrade Lieutenant," Makarov asks quietly, wiping the sight with a rag, "will we be lucky like this for much longer?" "Fools get lucky at cards, Makarov." Gromov cuts him off without looking up from his notes. "We aren't playing. We are working. As long as we follow the process technology, we will live. Check the recoil mechanism. The fluid level has dropped." Gromov closes the notebook. He knows statistics are working against them. But as long as the engine starts and the gun is capable of sending a shell, he will introduce his variables into this equation. Engineering calculation against blind chance. Reason against chaos. Ahead is Belgorod, and there the tasks will be more complex than dodging a single shot. There, a solution will be required that goes beyond the bounds of ordinary survival arithmetic. August 1943. The Belgorod direction. Topography here works for the enemy. The northern Donets River cuts the front like a surgical scar, creating a natural, insurmountable barrier. On the map, it is a thin blue vein. But in the reality of war, it is a hydrotechnical barrier turned by German engineers into a zone of total destruction. The western bank is high, steep, dominating. The eastern is low, open like a beggar's palm, an ideal shooting gallery for the Wehrmacht. The German defense is built according to all canons of fortification science. Sectors of fire overlap, creating a layer cake of trajectories through which not even a bird could fly. The ford, the only point where heavy equipment can cross the channel without laying pontoons,
is under the microscope of artillery observers. Gromov looks at this piece of landscape through the commander's periscope and sees not scenery, but a diagram of a fire trap. He sees camouflaged nests of 88mm anti-aircraft guns set for direct fire. These guns, capable of stitching through T-34 armor from 2 kilometers, are silent now. They are waiting.
The command's order is categorical. Seize a bridgehead on the other bank by dawn. But Gromov understands. A frontal attack by the battalion's main forces is not a tactical maneuver, but the disposal of personnel and material. The density of kinetic energy per square meter of water surface in the ford area exceeds the tensile strength of any armor steel. If the battalion enters the water here, in 12 minutes it will cease to exist as a combat unit. It is an equation with a negative discriminant. There is no solution in the realm of rational numbers. However, the engineering mind looks for a way out where regulation logic fails. To get the main forces through, one must hack the enemy's attention system. It is necessary to introduce a variable into the equation that will draw all the enemy's firepower resources onto itself. A phantom target is needed. A suicide target. Gromov enters the battalion commander's dugout. The air here is heavy, soaked in tobacco and tension. The conversation is short, dry, devoid of subordination trembling. An attack with the full composition is the loss of 50 machines. Gromov places a palm, black from grease, on the table. The Germans have sighted every bush. I propose an exchange, sacrificing a pawn to save the queen. The battalion commander looks at him from under his brows. He knows how to count, too. Be specific, engineer. I'll take 5 crews, a diversion group. We come out openly, at the central ford. We simulate the start of a general offensive, raise noise, smoke, ask for trouble. The Germans are pedants. They will react according to instruction. Transfer all fire to the detected threat. While they are melting our armor, you guide the battalion 3 kilometers downstream. There's a forest, a concealed approach. The pontoon troops will lay the crossing in silence. The battalion commander is silent for 10 seconds. That is the price of the decision. It's a one-way ticket, Gromov. You realize the chances of getting out on the bank for you are, arithmetically, less than 10%. Gromov interrupts harshly. But it will save 90% of the battalion. It's a profitable exchange rate. Permission to execute? Half an hour later, 5 tank commanders stand by machine number 114. No formation, just 5 men in oily overalls, closed in a circle. There is no place here for pompous speeches about the motherland and duty. This is a production meeting of suicide bombers. Gromov draws a diagram with a twig on the damp earth. The task is engineering. The lieutenant's voice sounds even, like the hum of a transformer. We are bait. The fatter the bait, the tighter the predator's grip. We go to the water at 1900 hours. The sun will be at our backs, blinding the German optics. This will give us a lead of 120 seconds. He circles the crossing point. Movement at maximum RPM. Formation, line abreast. Distance between machines, 40 meters. Fire on the move, continuously. Anywhere. The main thing is flashes and sound. We must convince them that a regiment is breaking through here. If we get hit? Asks the commander of the 3rd machine, Lieutenant Volkov, just a boy with a face grey from dust. If the machine is immobilized but the gun works, fire until the last shell. If it burns, bail out according to the situation. But remember, as long as you are shooting, they are looking at you, not at the main forces crossing. Every second gained of your life is the life of an infantry platoon down there. Questions? There are no questions. The mechanics of the order are transparent. The logic of sacrifice is accepted as a technical necessity. No one refuses.
no one takes a step back. In this circle, different laws of physics apply. The laws of masculine responsibility. Preparation begins. It is not the writing of farewell letters. It is checking assemblies and units before critical overload. A tank is not just a weapon. It is a complex thermodynamic system. Gromov personally climbs into the transmission compartment. He checks the tension of the fan belts, checks the oil level. In this battle, the engine will work in afterburner mode, at the limit of detonation. Any trifle, any bolt not tightened enough, could cost lives. Inside the fighting compartment, Gromov's crew works silently. Kostin wipes the vision blocks. Makarov loads the ammo rack. Sidorov checks the hatch locks. "Kostin," Gromov addresses the mechanic, wiping his hands with a rag. "We won't spare the clutches today. If we stop in the water, we are corpses. Squeeze everything that's in this diesel. Let it die, but drag us to the other bank." "Understood, Commander. I'll squeeze it dry." 1900 hours. The sun touches the horizon, painting the sky in crimson tones. 5 V2 engines start simultaneously. The earth shudders. The roar of 500 horsepower diesels merges into a single low-frequency hum that vibrates in the chest. Black columns of smoke strike the sky from the exhaust pipes. It is a challenge. It is a signal. The tanks jerk from their places. The clatter of tracks drowns out the noise of the wind. 5 steel boxes, 130 tons of metal, rush toward the river. Gromov stands in the hatch, catching the headwind with his face. He knows. These are the last moments of silence. There, on the other bank, acoustic operators have already detected the noise of motors. There, in rangefinders, images are already aligning. There, armor-piercing shells are already being rammed into gun breaches. The group comes into direct line of sight. The river glitters ahead, deceptively calm. To the water, 300 meters. To death, the same. "Hatches closed," the command in the headset sounds like a sentence. The heavy lid falls, cutting off the sunlight. The darkness of the tank embraces the men. Now their world is limited to instrument dials and narrow strips of vision blocks. "Speed! Give me speed!" Gromov yells, feeling the machine start to shake over bumps. The tanks fly toward the water, raising trails of dust. They look like enraged beasts rushing to attack a hunter. But the hunter is armed better. Gromov sees the first flash on the other bank. Soundless, bright. A second later, the sound of the shot catches up with the image, and a moment later, a fountain of dirty water shoots into the sky 10 meters from the left flank. It has begun. The engineering calculation has entered the phase of practical experiment. Probability theory begins its deadly countdown. The water boils with explosions. The air fills with the shriek of shrapnel. 5 machines go into hell to open the gates to paradise for the others. Gromov feels no fear, only a cold, ringing tension of the mind, calculating the trajectory of maneuver in the chaos of destruction. The northern Donets River ceases to be a water barrier and turns into a zone of total destruction. The surface of the water boils. This is not a metaphor, but the physical state of the medium. Hundreds of fragments of red-hot metal falling into the water instantly evaporate it, creating a dense curtain of steam and spray. Into this milky white wall, 5 T-34 machines crash at full speed. The impact with the water kills the speed. The multi-ton machine, just flying over land like a projectile, gets bogged down. Hydrodynamic resistance hits the tracks. Engines roar, choking from overload. Water floods the vision blocks, momentarily blinding the driver mechanics. But stopping is impossible. Stopping in the water is death. The bottom is silty, viscous. If the tracks lose traction, the tank will turn into a stationary target.
Gromov feels the machine drifting sideways. The current presses on the side.
Kosten, hold the vector. Don't let it drift. Gas!
German artillery shifts fire. Gromov's calculation proved true with frightening accuracy. Anti-aircraft guns of 88mm caliber, standing on direct fire, pound the water. Shells enter the river, raising pillars of water the height of a 5-story building. It is more terrifying than explosions on land. Water does not absorb the shockwave. It transmits it. Every burst near the tank hits the hull like a giant hammer. Inside the turret, the ringing is such that blood runs from noses. Welded seams crack from the tension. Lieutenant Volkov's machine goes to the left, closer to the center of the ford. It takes the first blow. Gromov sees this through the side vision block. An armor-piercing shell hits the side, right under the turret. The physics of the process is merciless. The kinetic energy of a slug weighing 10 kilograms, flying at a speed of 800 meters per second, turns into thermal energy. The armor is not just pierced, it splashes inside in molten drops. Detonation of the ammo load happens instantly. The tank turret is torn off and tossed into the air. It makes a slow rotation, spraying fire, and falls with a hiss into the water. Only a skeleton remains in the place of the combat vehicle, from which a pillar of flame shoots up, unnaturally bright against the gray water. Gasoline and oil burn on the surface of the river, not mixing with it.
Number 3, minus!
Sidorov's voice in the intercom trembles, but his hands continue to drive the shell into the breach.
Volkov, gone. Belay emotions,
barks Gromov. He has no time to mourn. Grief is for later. Right now, the bitterness of loss clogs communication channels and interferes with control.
Fire at flashes. Rapid fire. Don't aim, just shoot.
We need noise.
Gromov's tank fires on the move. This is not shooting for effect, but for suppression. No stabilizers. The machine rocks on the bumps of the bottom. The barrel sways wildly. Shells fly off toward the German bank, exploding now on the beach, now in the forest. But they perform their task. They attract attention. The Germans see furious resistance. They see 5, no, already 4, brazen Russian machines barreling straight at their guns. In their optics, this is the main threat. To the right, machine number 4 flares up. A shell severed the track. The tank is spun by the current, exposing the vulnerable rear. The next shot punches through the engine transmission compartment. The engine dies. The machine freezes in the middle of the river. The crew does not leave the tank. The turret turns, snapping back with shots. They are executing the order. As long as the gun works, fire. They become a stationary firing point in the middle of burning water, winning another 30, 40, 50 seconds for the battalion. Gromov sees small caliber shells, 20 millimeters, 37, starting to hammer the armor of number 4. The armor sparks. The tank turns into a sieve, but continues to shoot. The last shot sounds already through the flames engulfing the turret. Then, the explosion of fuel tanks. Number 4 falls silent forever.
50 meters to shore!
Screams Kostin. He does not see the death of his comrades. He looks only at the dirty strip of land ahead. His task is to drag the commander and crew onto dry land. The water around boils with shrapnel. Gromov's tank takes a glancing blow to the turret. The screech of metal is such that it seems the scalp is being torn from the head along with the helmet. The commander's cupola optics are smashed to smithereens. Gromov falls to the floor of the fighting compartment, covering his face with his hands. Shards of glass and scale slash his overalls.
Alive?
Makarov's voice.
We're working,
wheezes Gromov, rising. Blood flows down his cheek, but it's a scratch.
Mechanic, full power. Get us on the bank. The tracks grip solid ground. The machine jerks, lifting its nose to the sky. Water rolls off the armor in streams, exposing smoking metal. The tank crawls onto the sand like a prehistoric monster. The motor roars at the limit, belching clouds of black smoke. They are on the shore, in the dead zone under the steep cliff where direct fire guns cannot reach. 2 more machines crawl out behind. 3 out of 5. 60% losses. This is dry statistics. But behind these percentages are 8 men who remained there in the river. 8 guys with whom Gromov smoked rough tobacco yesterday and shared canned meat. "Stop engine," commands Gromov.
In the ensuing relative silence, one can hear the metal cooling, crackling like firewood in a stove. And one can hear something else. Far to the left, about 3 kilometers downstream, a rumble grows. A powerful rolling roar of hundreds of motors. These are the main forces. The battalion has moved. The German defense, exposed and distracted by a handful of suicide bombers at the central ford, missed the main blow to the flank. Gromov opens the hatch. The air smells not of river freshness, but of burnt rubber, fried meat, and overheated iron. He looks back at the river, a sight terrible and majestic in its tragedy. In the middle of the dark water burn 2 torches. The flame reflects in the river, creating the illusion that the water itself is burning. Black smoke spreads low, covering the horizon. Sidorov climbs out of the loader's hatch, tears off his headset. His face is black with soot. Only the whites of his eyes and tear tracks cutting through the grime are visible. He looks at the burning tanks.
Collier is there. And Sarika, he whispers.
They completed the task. Gromov's voice sounds hard, like the slam of a bolt. There is no room for pity in it. Pity devalues the sacrifice. There is only the recording of a fact. Thanks to them, the battalion is already on the other bank. That is the price. We paid it. Gromov does not let the crew go soft. He knows psychology. If feelings are given free rein now, in an hour the crew will be combat ineffective. Look around. Check the chassis. Report on damages. The war isn't over. He takes out a cigarette but does not light it. He looks at the burning tanks. In his engineering brain, a formula involuntarily surfaces. Maneuver efficiency equals the ratio of the task completed to the losses incurred. The task is 100% complete. Losses, 40% of the group's personnel. From the staff's point of view, a brilliant operation. From a human point of view, it is ash on the lips. Victory has the taste of burning. The radio comes to life. Through the crackle of static, the battalion commander's voice breaks through. Orlan, this is 1. We passed clean. Securing positions. Germans are running. How is it with you? Over. Gromov grabs the handset. His finger freezes on the button. He looks at the river, where the lives of his men are burning out. This is Orlan. Mission accomplished. Enemy disoriented. Losses... He pauses, inhaling the acrid smoke. Losses... 2 units. Crews perished. Continuing mission execution. Out. He drops the handset. No eternal memory. No heroes. Only facts. War is work. Dirty, hard work, where lives serve as tools, and the result is lines in reports. Gromov descends inside the turret. It is familiar and cramped there. There is no burning river there. There is a sight, a breach, and an ammo rack. Everything is clear there, and outside, too much grief that does not yield to mathematical analysis. Tank number 114 turns around and crawls up the slope, leaving the blazing crossing behind. Ahead is Belgorod. Ahead are new equations that must be solved to survive. Moscow, 1944. This city hits the senses harder than the shockwave of a high-explosive shell. Here there is no whistle of mines or screech of tracks, but the acoustic background causes nausea in Lieutenant Gromov. The ringing of trams, the laughter of passers-by, the clicking of women's heels on asphalt, music from loudspeakers, all this merges into a chaotic, illogical noise. At the front, every sound has meaning. A click is a bolt, a hum is aviation, a whistle is death. Sound is information for survival. Here, in the rear, sound is simply trash, meaningless vibration of air. Gromov walks down Gorky Street. He moves not like a strolling citizen, but like a combat unit on the march. The movement vector is straight. His gaze scans the space 360 degrees. Sectors of fire. Cover. Firing points. A habit ingrained in the subcortex forces him to evaluate attics and basements as potential positions for machine gunners. He is dressed in a dress uniform, with the Order of the Red Star on his chest, but he feels as if he has walked out onto the square naked, without armor, without the familiar steel capsule that separates him from a hostile world. He was summoned to the People's Commissariat for consultations on refining the transmission of new T-34 modifications. There, in offices smelling of paper and ink, he felt relatively calm. They talked about metal, torque, engine life. It was a clear language of numbers. But now, having received a pass for 3 hours until his train, he has found himself in the open space of civilian life. Shop windows are intact. Glass glints in the sun. Gromov catches himself looking for cracks from a blast wave on them. There are none. It seems wrong, almost a hallucination. A world in which glass does not shatter seems fragile. Fake. People pass by, men in coats, women in bright dresses. They are eating ice cream. They are smiling. For Gromov, who a week ago was pulling a burned driver out of a hatch, this looks like a theatrical production, a bad set. He wants to shout, "Get down!" just to check if they have self-preservation instincts. But he is silent. He walks, trying not to brush against passers-by with his shoulder, because he fears that from a collision with his stony heaviness, they will crumble. Children's world. Huge arched windows. Gromov stops in front of the entrance. He has a task. His wife Vera wrote in her last folded letter that their daughter Sonia dreams of a doll, a real one with closing eyes. Gromov pushes the heavy door. A smell hits his nose that makes his head spin. Vanilla, textiles, some kind of pastry. No burning, no diesel. Sterility. Inside is a hum of voices. Children run, laugh. Gromov stands by the entrance like a foreign body. A lump of dark, heavy past amidst a bright future. He feels gazes on him, on his shoulder boards, on his hands. He hid them in his pockets, but he knows the grease hasn't washed off completely. It has eaten into the skin, become a pigment. These hands killed. These hands aimed a gun. And now they must choose a toy. He approaches the counter. The salesgirl, a young woman with painted lips, looks at him with pity and admiration simultaneously. "Can I help you, comrade officer?" "I need a doll." Gromov's voice sounds hollow, as if from a tank. "For a girl of 5. Functional. Durable." The girl smiles and takes a box from the shelf. In it lies a doll in a blue dress. It has blonde curls and unnaturally pink cheeks. "Here, take a look. Katyusha. Her eyes close if you tilt her, and her arms move on joints." Gromov takes the doll. It weighs about 300 grams. weightless, hollow. He is used to holding armor-piercing shells weighing 6 kilograms. He is afraid to squeeze his fingers a little harder and crush this fragile plastic. He examines the eye mechanism. A simple gravitational system. Counterweight, axle. Engineering thought directed at simulating sleep. Reliable construction? He asks, turning the doll. The head wobbles. Oh, come on, laughs the salesgirl. It's a toy. You have to love it, not test it for durability. Love. Gromov looks at the doll's face. Glass eyes stare into nowhere. There is no meaning in this object, no utilitarian function. It does not protect, does not shoot, does not carry cargo. It is pure aesthetics. A symbol of peace which they, there on the Kursk salient and on the Dnieper, are trying to preserve by burning themselves alive. He pays. The bills in his fingers seem like toy wrappers. Money matters here. At the front, money can only be used to kindle a fire. There the currency is different. Cartridges, diesel, alcohol, life. The exchange rate is cruel. 1 crew life for 1 height, 3 tanks for 1 crossing. And here, for 30 rubles, one can buy a piece of painted plastic. The economics of absurdity. Gromov walks out onto the street with the box under his arm. The box is tied with a ribbon. It looks grotesque. An officer with the heavy gaze of a killer and a child's toy. He feels like a spy, an alien. This peaceful city is not his habitat. His environment is the oily interior of a 34, where everything is subordinate to the logic of battle. Where a friend is someone who covers your back, not someone who smiles in line. He sits on a bench in a square. Pigeons coo nearby. Birds of peace. Fat, lazy, unafraid. Gromov lights a Bellamore cigarette, crushing the mouthpiece with his teeth. The smoke calms him a little, creating a familiar screen. He looks at the theater opposite. A poster invites to an operetta. People are going to listen to music. While his guys, Kostin, Sidorov, Makarov, right now perhaps, are going deaf from explosions somewhere near Kharkov. The contrast tears at his consciousness. Gromov realizes a terrible thing. He does not envy these people. He does not hate them for their calmness. He simply does not understand them. They are civilians, a different biological species. They live in a dimension where death is a tragedy happening once in a lifetime, not a daily routine like brushing teeth. We are stokers, thinks Gromov, looking at the cigarette smoke. We stand by the furnace of the locomotive of history and throw our lives in there, so that in the first-class cars music plays and the lights are on. The passengers shouldn't know what the furnace looks like. They don't need to see the dirt, sweat, and burning meat. Otherwise, the music will stop bringing them joy. He looks at the doll in the box. This gift is a bridge, a thin thread connecting him to the daughter he hasn't seen for 2 years. But he knows that when he returns and gives her this gift, he won't be able to tell how he bought it. He won't be able to explain to her the price of this silence. Time is running out. 40 minutes to the train. Gromov stands up. He feels relief. Soon the station. Soon the clatter of wheels, the smell of coal, and then the combat zone. There is dirt, there are lice, there is blood. But there, everything is honest. There are no fake smiles and glass eyes. There is an enemy visible in the sight, and there is armor whose thickness you know. He walks to the subway, quickening his pace. He needs to escape this paradise. Paradise turned out to be too stuffy for a man used to breathing burning fumes.
Gromov dives into the underground like into a tank hatch. It is dark and noisy below. This is soothing. The engineer returns to his workplace.
The equation of war is not yet solved, and his variable is needed there, in the West. And let the doll remind that somewhere there exists a world in which the biggest problem is an unglued eyelash on a plastic princess. 1945. The geometry of war has changed. Endless steppes and horizontal panoramas remained in the East. Here, in Europe, space has compressed to the size of a street, an alley, an opening in a brick wall. Tank number 114 bites into the cobblestones of German cities with its tracks. This is no longer just movement by azimuth, it is a labyrinth. The war has become vertical. Death now comes not only from the horizon, but also from the upper floors, from basements, from sewer manholes. Gromov's tank looks like a veteran who has passed through a meat grinder and been reassembled. The factory paint has long been hidden under layers of soot, dirt, and brick dust. Grids are welded onto the sides, bed springs, pieces of fences. This is not decor. This is an engineering answer to a new threat. Shaped charge grenades, Panzerfausts, a cheap stamped tube with an explosive charge capable of burning through T-34 armor. The physics of the cumulative jet is merciless. A focused explosion creates pressure of millions of atmospheres, turning armor into liquid. The jet enters inside, killing the crew with pressure difference and sprays of molten metal. The combat distance has shortened to a stone's throw, 30 meters, 20. Gromov hates these cities. A tank here is an elephant in a china shop, blind and clumsy. The long gun barrel hinders turning in narrow passages. Any turn of the turret threatens to hit the wall of a house. Engineering calculation here works at the limit of reaction speeds. There is no time for ballistic calculations. There are only reflexes. Saw movement in a window, shot, without identifying the target, without doubts. The crew, Kostin, Sidorov, Makarov, is alive. Contrary to all armored forces statistics, contrary to probability theory, which allotted them 3 weeks of life in 43. Now they are a statistical anomaly. 4 men who went from Kursk to the Oder in one box. They are no longer people in the usual sense. They are biomechanical appendages to levers and sights. Personalities have been erased. Functions remain. Right, second floor, window! Gromov's voice in the headset sounds monotone, like a recording on a phonograph record. No screaming. The command is given on the exhale. See it. Makarov doesn't waste time confirming. The turret jerks to the right. Fractions of a second decide who dies. The man with the tube on his shoulder, or the crew? Shot. A high explosive shell flies into the window opening. The explosion blows out part of the facade. A brick avalanche crashes onto the pavement, raising a cloud of gray, stifling dust. Inside the tank, work is refined to assembly line automatism. Sidorov drives shells into the breach with the rhythm of a piston. His movements are sparing, verified to the millimeter. He doesn't look at the shell. His hands find the ammo tray themselves. Kostin drives the machine in jerks. Short dash, stop, shot, retreat. He is a dancer on a minefield. He feels the dimensions of the machine with his skin. He knows where the fender ends and the wall begins without looking in the vision block. Berlin, May. The city isn't burning, it's smoldering. The air here is dense, heavy. It can be cut with a knife. It is a mixture of concrete dust, plaster, and propellant gases. Visibility, 50 meters. There is no sun,
only a murky gray spot in the sky hidden by the smoke of fires. Gromov's tank fights its way to the center. The streets are blocked with barricades of trams, furniture, uprooted stones. Each barricade is a task. Ram it? Impossible. Might be mined. Go around? Nowhere. Shoot it apart? Low on shells. Kostin, carefully, in first gear.
Push the tram, commands Gromov. The tank leans its frontal armor against the side of an overturned carriage. The engine roars, belching black smoke. Metal screeches against metal. The tram reluctantly shifts, freeing a passage exactly the width of the machine's hull. Gromov watches the roofs. The main danger is there. The gun elevation angle is limited. If a man with a Panzerfaust shoots from above, into the roof of the turret or engine compartment, armor won't save them. There is only 15 millimeters of steel there. Metal fatigue is transmitted to the men. Suspension springs have sagged. The diesel eats oil by the bucket. Hatch seals have dried out and let acrid smoke inside. The men are worn out too. Eyes are inflamed from constant tension. Hands shake when there is no work and become steel when they touch mechanisms. They haven't slept for 3 days. The body works on reserve energy sources, burning itself. Gromov catches himself thinking that he has stopped perceiving time. There is only an endless alternation. Loading, aiming, shot, recoil. Landmark, Moltke Bridge, straight ahead. Gromov checks the map, which has long turned into a rag. To the Reichstag, 800 meters. 800 meters. On a testing ground, this is point-blank range. Here, in agonizing Berlin, it is infinity. Every meter of asphalt is under fire. Machine guns beat from basements. Anti-aircraft guns in the Tiergarten Park have lowered their barrels and are pounding with direct fire. Ahead, a tank from a neighboring platoon flares up. A shaped charge jet hit the side. The crew doesn't have time to jump out. Gromov sees this, but feels no emotions. Pity atrophied back on the Vistula. Now it is simply information. The sector to the left is dangerous. Left side to the building, cover with the wall, he commands. Tank number 114 presses against the ruins of a department store. The screech of brick on armor sounds like a groan. Makarov catches a flash in the basement opposite in his sight. Shot. The basement turns into a grave. Clear, wheezes Sidorov. They crawl forward, slowly, inevitably, like a glacier. Gromov looks into the periscope. Through breaks in the smoke, a massive gray building with a dome flickers. The Reichstag. It is not a symbol of victory for him right now. It is simply a massive fortification object, saturated with firepower. A point on the map where the geometry of all fronts converges. Visual on object, reports Gromov. Distance 400. Group target. High explosive. The last meters of the war are the hardest. Resistance becomes fanatical. The Germans understand this is the end and fight with the desperation of the doomed. The air is filled with tracers. They draw lines of fire in the gray gloom, weaving a deadly net. The tank shudders from a close explosion. Shrapnel slashes the transmission. But the machine goes on. This mechanism, created for destruction, refuses to die. It drags its creators to the finish line. Shot. Another shot. Casings ring on the floor, carpeting it in brass. Gromov feels every bolt in the hull vibrating. This is the resonance of history. Here and now ends the equation he started solving 2 years ago in the burning steppe near Kursk. Silence comes suddenly. At first it seems like concussion, that ears have failed from overload. But no, they just stopped shooting. Gromov looks at his watch. The second hand continues its run.
The engine works at idle, quietly purring like a tired beast. Smoke begins to settle. Ahead, through the grey veil, the sooty colonnade of the Reichstag emerges. On the steps, figures of people in grey-green. They are raising their hands. "Stop," says Gromov. The word falls into the silence like a stone. Kostin takes his feet off the pedals. The hum of the clutches dies down. The tank freezes. It has traveled its path. From the Volga to the Spree, thousands of kilometers, tons of burned fuel, hundreds of weight of fired metal. The crew is silent. No one shouts, "Hurrah!" There is no strength for joy. Only emptiness. The feeling that a spring compressed inside for 2 years has finally snapped. Gromov opens the hatch. The dust of Berlin settles on his face, clogs his nose. It smells of lime and a foreign, dead empire. He looks at his men. They are alive. Dirty, scary, looking like miners climbed out of a cave-in, but alive. The problem is solved. The answer is obtained. But the price of this solution is written in the grey hair of a 25-year-old lieutenant. June 1945, Chelyabinsk. The station hums like an overloaded transformer. The air here is different. It lacks the metallic taste of blood and lead that lungs got used to over 1,418 days. Here it smells of coal dust, cabbage pies, and cheap tobacco. This smell hits the nose, causing dizziness. The organism, tuned to survival mode under extreme overloads, falters. Adrenaline pit. Gromov stands in the vestibule of the train car, feeling the floor vibrate under his feet. The train slows down. The clatter of wheels, this metronome of the road, changes rhythm, becoming rarer, quieter. Brake shoes press against wheels with a screech. The sound resembles the gnashing of a tank track that has jumped off a roller. Gromov flinches. Reflex works faster than thought. The body tenses, preparing for impact. But there is no impact. Only the soft jolt of stopping. The inertia of the train's movement is dampened by friction. Physics works flawlessly. Doors open. Gromov takes a step onto the platform. Under his boots is not trench mud, not Berlin cobblestones, but the hard asphalt of a rear city. He looks at the crowd. It is chaotic Brownian motion of hundreds of people. Women, children, old men. Flowers, posters, music. The orchestra plays a march, but the trumpets are out of tune. To Gromov, this noise seems irrational, too loud, too disorderly. At the front, any sound is a signal. Here, sound is simply emotion. He searches for a point of reference with his eyes. Viewing sector, 180 degrees. He scans faces like he used to scan the edge of a forest, looking for camouflaged guns. His gaze latches onto a familiar silhouette. By a column. Vera. She has aged. Gromov notes this as a fact, without pity, with dry acknowledgement. War in the rear has its own arithmetic of human material wear. 12-hour shifts at the lathe, the ration card system, cold, waiting for a death notice. This ages faster than time. She has wrinkles near her eyes, shoulders slumped, as if an invisible load presses on them. Next to her is a girl, Sonia. She has grown. Gromov remembers her as a 3-year-old when he left in 41. Now a person stands before him whom he almost doesn't know. 5 years of separation is a chasm. It is a missed stage of family evolution. Sonia presses a doll to her chest. That very one, from the Moscow children's world, bought in 44. A plastic Katyusha in a blue dress. The toy looks strangely new against the background of the girl's washed-out little coat. This piece of bright plastic is the only thing here untouched by war. A constant of peaceful life that Gromov managed to send across the front line by mail parcel. He walks toward them. Legs seem like cotton. Walking 50 meters along the platform turns out to be harder than crawling a kilometer under mortar fire. There you know the rules. Here, there are no rules. Gromov is afraid. Afraid that his hands, used to levers and the cold steel of a breech block, will turn out too rough for this world. His palms are instruments of murder and repair. The skin on them is tough as sandpaper. Ingrained soot has become part of the epidermis. How to hug a wife with these hands?
How to stroke a child. It is a mechanism compatibility conflict.
Andre!
Vera's scream drowns out the noise of the orchestra. She throws herself at him. The impact of a soft body against the stiff fabric of the greatcoat and metal of metals. Gromov freezes. He doesn't know where to put his hands. Then, obeying some ancient pre-engineering instinct, he hugs her. Carefully. Dosage of effort, as if working with a fragile fuse. He feels her trembling. This is resonance. Her trembling is transmitted to him, piercing the armor of alienation he had been building for 4 years.
Returned, she whispers. Alive.
Gromov is silent. He has a lump in his throat. Vocal cords are spasmed. He wants to say something important, something right, but only technical terms climb into his head. Task completed. Personnel arrived. Material part normal. All words of love seem small, erased, insufficient for this moment. He pulls away and squats in front of his daughter, eye level, on one line. Sonia looks at him with fright and curiosity. For her, this man in shoulder boards, smelling of tobacco and the strange, sharp chemistry of the railway, is a stranger. Father is a photograph on the dresser. And this is reality. Reality is harsh, unshaven, with a heavy gaze. "Hello, Sofia Andreevna," says Gromov. His voice is hoarse, foreign. He tries to smile, but facial muscles, used to being a mask of calmness, obey poorly. The smile comes out crooked, broken. The girl is silent. She presses the doll tighter. Her little fingers have turned white from tension. Gromov looks at the toy. The glass eyes of the doll look at him with the same indifference as back then, in the store on Gorky Street. But now this doll is not just an object. It is a password, an IFF code. "The doll, is it whole?" Gromov asks stupidly. He touches the plastic arm of the toy with his finger. The contrast is monstrous. The black, roughened finger of a tanker, and pink, smooth plastic. Metal and toy. Death and childhood. In this touch is all the absurdity and greatness of the moment.
Whole,
Sonia answers quietly.
Mama said Papa sent it. Papa is a tanker.
A tanker, nods Gromov. Was a tanker. Now just Papa.
He picks her up. The weight of the child is negligible compared to the weight of a shell. But holding her is scary. Center of gravity shifted. Gromov straightens up. Vera presses against his shoulder. They stand in a triangle in the middle of the crowd. Closed circuit. Electric chain restored. Around them, people are crying. Some from happiness, some from grief at not meeting their own. Gromov sees a woman in a black headscarf standing alone, clutching an empty envelope. The statistics of war are inexorable. For everyone returned, there are those who remained in the earth. Gromov knows this math better than others. He remembers Volkov, burned in the river.
Remembers the crew of the fourth machine. Remembers the infantry, ground up by tracks near Belgorod. He is here for them. He is an error in the equation of death, a survivor despite everything. "Let's go home, Andryusha," says Vera. "There's borscht at home, and I bought real bread without ration cards." Home. The word sounds unusual. For Gromov, home is the cramped space behind armor where it smells of diesel. Apartment, walls, furniture, these are forgotten concepts. He will have to learn to live anew, learn to walk without caution, learn to sleep in silence without jumping up at every rustle, learn to be a husband and father, not a crew commander. It will be a complex engineering task. Restructuring the system from military mode to civilian requires time and resources. The psyche has inertia. The braking distance of war is long. The clang of the breech and commands in the headset still sound in his head. He still calculates firing angles looking at the roofs of houses. But now, feeling the warmth of his daughter's small body in his arms and his wife's breath on his neck, Gromov understands. He has something to conduct this reconstruction for. They walk to the station exit. The sun hits their eyes. Bright June sun. It no longer blinds enemy optics. It simply shines. Gromov squints. His war is over. Tank number 114 remained in Berlin, frozen as a monument to itself. And designer Gromov returned to build a life that must be stronger than any armor. In his pocket lies a notebook with calculations of death, but it is no longer needed. Now other blueprints are needed. 1947, Chelyabinsk tractor plant. The roar in the workshops is the same as 5 years ago, but the tonality has changed. The strained, hysterical note of haste, when every hour of downtime cost a battalion its life at the front, has disappeared. Now the metal sounds measured, bass, confident. Sparks of electric welding shower in cascades, illuminating the space with a bluish, deathly light, resembling gun flashes. But now these sparks birth not armor, but plows and bulldozer blades. Andrei Gromov stands at a drawing board. He is no longer a lieutenant. He is the chief designer of the Industrial Tractor Bureau. On the drawing paper before him is a blueprint of a new clutch assembly for the S-80 tractor. Lines are sharp, firm. The pencil in his hand doesn't shake, just as the cannon trigger lever didn't shake in 43. But the tasks have changed. Before, he calculated armor slope angles for shell ricochet. Now, he calculates soil resistance during plowing. Before, the variables were slug flight speed and thickness of German steel. Now, black soil density and torque on the shaft. Physics remained the same. Strength of materials knows no concepts of war or peace. Metal still tires, tears, and bends under load. But the goal of force application has become creative. Gromov looks at the shop floor from above, from the gallery. He sees finished machines leaving the gates. They are powerful, tracked, painted a peaceful yellow color. But a professional's eye sees the genetics of a tank in them. The same rollers, the same clutches, the same diesel roar. A tractor is a tank stripped of armor and gun, deprived of the function of murder and returned to its original essence, working with the earth. Not tearing it with explosions, but cultivating it. Gromov feels the satisfaction of an engineer who has solved a complex optimization problem. He managed to beat a sword into a plowshare without changing the fundamental principles of mechanics. His war ended not in Berlin, but here, when the first peaceful tractor rolled off the assembly line, and he realized that this machine would never burn with a crew inside. Our days. Belgorod region, Prokhorovka Field. The silence here is deafening. The wind walks across the endless expanse, swaying the tall grass. The sky is clean, deep, bottomless. It is hard to imagine that 80 years ago this horizon was closed by black smoke, and the earth was soaked in oil and iron a meter deep. Now it is an open-air museum, a temple of memory. On a high granite pedestal freezes a T-34 tank, hull number 114. It is painted a fresh, thick green color that hides the scars of the metal. The weld seams are rough, wartime. They were welded by teenagers and women in unheated workshops, but these seams have held the structure dead tight for almost a century. A group of tourists approaches the monument. Young people, children, a guide with a microphone. They look at the tank from bottom up. For them, it is an artifact, an object of history, as distant as knightly armor or Roman chariots. They see aesthetics, sloped armor, the predatory profile of the turret, the power of the rollers. They take photos on phones, smile, lay red carnations at the tracks. But they do not see the main thing. They do not see the mathematics. They do not know that this tank is not just a monument to victory. It is a monument to the engineering calculation of Lieutenant Gromov. Through the layers of paint, the dent on the turret ring is not visible, the trace of that very blow that jammed the gun in July 43. Tourists do not know that exactly this technical malfunction was the beginning of a daring game of poker with death. They do not smell the smoke canisters with which the crew simulated a fire. They do not hear the clang of the breech block, counting off seconds of life for 5 German Panthers. For them, this tank is static. But for history, it is filled with furious dynamics. It is a frozen equation of survival. Every facet of the turret, every track link is a variable that was accounted for and used. Gromov did not fight with fury. He fought with intellect. And this intellect is now forever cast in metal, standing on a pedestal. A boy of about 10 breaks away from the group and runs up to the tank. He knocks with his palm on the cold armor of a road wheel. The sound is dull, dense. The boy laughs. He does not know that under this wheel, the earth once burned. And thank God he doesn't know. Gromov, if he could see this now, would approve. This was his ultimate goal. Not glory, not medals, not a place in textbooks. His goal was to create conditions where children can fearlessly touch tanks without risking being killed. He worked with overloads, solved problems with 3 unknowns under fire, so that in the future, the equation of life would have only one solution: peace. The monument stands motionless. The gun barrel points to the sky, but now it is not a threat, but a vector, a pointer. It shows that strength is not in the caliber, but in who controls that caliber. Tank number 114 completed its combat mission. It survived. It saved the crew. It destroyed the enemy. And now it has the right to eternal rest. The wind rustles in the wreaths. The sun heats the armor. If you place your hand on the hull, you can feel this warmth. It is not the heat of a fire, not the heat of an engine. It is the heat of the sun, stored by the metal. The energy of a star that gives life. Gromov's engineering genius, embodied in tactics and mechanics, dissolved into this calm. He became part of the landscape, part of history, part of the molecular lattice of steel. We, the descendants, look at this tank and see a grim machine. But in reality, before us is an instrument of peace. The heaviest, roughest, cruelest instrument humanity had to invent to defend its right to exist. The mathematics of war is finished. The answer is obtained and written in blood on the tablets of history. And this answer is simple. Life is stronger than metal. Reason is stronger than chaos. Creation is stronger than destruction. The tank on the pedestal continues its service. It holds the horizon. It guarantees that variables of death will never again be introduced into the equation of our life. And as long as it stands, as long as we remember the formula of Engineer Gromov's feat, the sky above us will remain clean.